Another project that we working on during this time, which is another scale, is the Museum of West African Arts. Museum of, it's called MOWAA, Museum of West African Arts in Benin. And this project really started off first as a conversation, as a conversation about how do we deal with the restitution of our artifacts and objects which were taken in the colonial plunder, which happened. And, you know, the directors of this institute came to me and said, David, what the argument that's always placed in front of us is that we have no infrastructure that can receive these objects. So how can we even be in a conversation about restitution when we haven't even built the infrastructure for that? So I said, well, this is where architecture is powerful. Let us demonstrate institutional spaces that these objects could come to, and let us also demonstrate infrastructure that can train generations of custodians of curatorial sort of projects, but also historical restoration, archaeologists who will start to value our history and to be the custodians and the caregivers for that. This project then, from being about creating an art institution, very quickly became very focused in being able to allow for the works to come back to the continent. This idea of proving that we could make an infrastructure that could support it became the paramount discussion. So how to make this infrastructure that would support the return and allow a sort of dialogue to happen, and then from that to be able to grow from it, cultural institutions, once we start receiving our cultural patrimony, start training our teams and our generations to be able to be the custodians of creating institutions that will show this work from our own continent back out to the world, rather than the world looking at it and holding it and showing it back to us. And if you're not able as an African to travel to the West, never being able to see your ancestors' artifacts. So another project of injustice that really moved me in the studio, and we really got behind this project to really push it. We designed the project more or less almost pro bono, I think. My CEO will tell me. And it managed to get published in the New York Times because they couldn't believe an African office would do this. So it exploded the conversation. It was happening in France, the US got involved, and the whole thing started to become a very powerful conversation. And then the political parties started to get involved. It started to erupt into politics. Next. The sad thing for us is that the politics, rather than marshalling and being an agent to sharpen this spear that has been made, to accelerate this effort, became a moment of division about who did what and who justifies what. All very important conversations, but ones that really, for me, I'm sad, became a kind of impediment into the story of this project. I mean, what is fascinating is that MOWAA is probably now one of the most famous museums in the world that's not built. That is not built. But I think that in a weird way, it's also become a model that is has activated an awareness on the continent that we need to claim and make our own futures from our past. Images of the colonial plunder, the burning of palaces, and literally the looting of extraordinary centuries of work, and then being told that these are devil-worshipping objects, so we should not look at them. Our history and our heritage. For me, this kind of language that is propagated around this work is unconscionable. These are the artifacts of our ancestors. We need to respect and understand what they are and grow from them. They're tropes for the future. They're not things to do with anything to do with evil, but to do with our futures. Next. The architecture of Benin, one of the most beautiful cities in Africa, probably at that time, 1,000-year-old city, as old as London is now, that had lights, street lights, had roots, had built the biggest network of rammed earth in the world, more than the Great Wall of China. Everybody thinks the Great Wall of China is where it starts. Benin built more earthen walls than China. They were destroyed. There was a sense that how could these people, how could we go and say we're taking things from these people if they are so sophisticated and so extraordinary in their architecture and their cities? So we have to be careful about the stories about our artifacts and the stories that we consume about our own histories. So the building project, which is essentially a warehouse for storage, becomes more than that. It becomes a moment to use construction to create a cultural infrastructure. It is a place for exhibition, for archaeologists to work, a place to display things, to have lectures, and a community center for the community to be able to gather, and a place to remember the walls of Benin, the curving walls. Benin's walls were radial. They were circumferences that went around the city in radiuses that talked about the different hierarchies and layers. I mean, an extraordinary, almost sci-fi image of what a city should look like was made in the ancient world. And we are looking for futures and models that are so not even close to the radicality of our ancestors. So for me, this making of a warehouse was to become much more than that. It had to demonstrate this technology of curving rammed earth systems as a kind of memory, and then to become this moment of future and ancient technologies woven together. This warehouse is really a technological engine because it has to keep material at a stable temperature. So let's just go into it. Let me show you. This is the master plan of the campus. Next. The building itself. So the beige became, we dedicated a whole area to exhibition and public areas with auditoriums and offices around it. The gray is the loading docks, the archaeological spaces, the hard engine of the building. And then the central square is the archive storage boxes that allow us to be able to repatriate thousands of objects in this one little building. We can repatriate thousands of objects into this building. And we said that we wanted to repatriate them, but also create a relationship with the public. So the public face, which is at the front, has a glass front to the archive, so that the archive, as it's being built and being returned, is also visible to the public. People can see the things being brought back. Next. So this is this building and these curving walls that people say, why is it curving? It's just speaking to these fragments to try and activate a memory. Next. And then the section in the center, using northern lights to bathe it in what it needs. That's the environmental diagram. It uses earth roof to insulate, to help us bring our energy loads down. We collect our water. You know, the whole idea of sort of biophilic and green design is just to be built into architecture. It's not something to celebrate. It's actually something that's normal. We should not be thinking that that means we've achieved anything. That means you've just become normal. And then from that, what else do you do? Next. And a moment, if this is a community garden, I'm always obsessed with the idea that we create arboretums, places where all the plant life of our communities are seen, that our gardens are not just ornamental, but also educational. What grows here? How can we talk to communities about that? Next. And then this is the engine of the building. The thing that is, can you hold? Yeah, don't. The thing that is the machine that is usually in between the floor of a ceiling and a slab, we put on top, so that it is a system that can easily be accessed and changed can be worked with without disturbing the architecture of the warehouse. Next. So this engine sits on top of this ancient system, like these two worlds colliding. Next. And then these pavilions that allow you to come in, which are these low-carbon concrete structures. Next. Next. The entrance with its rammed earth walls. Next. So this curvilinear, amazing, sort of, for me, this, childlike romanticizing of what Benin was. Because right now, Benin is full of rectangles. There are no curved buildings anymore. Next. Next. And then the public area. This is an area that anybody is able to go to. And the Ministry of Culture brought artifacts from their archive that they've never shown anywhere to this building, because we finally made an infrastructure that could support it. And the most beautiful objects from the archives in Nigeria are now on display in this building. Incredible bronze castings, incredible ceramic and pottery that the community, people just don't know. As beautiful as anything in the world, in the British Museum or the Louvre or anywhere, just in this little building. Next. Next. And then these are the archive storage containers. So the idea is that you're looking from the glass room into the space, it's always lit, and these elements will be placed in there. The glass has UV filters, so the light will not affect the artifacts. The glass is UV filtered, so anybody thinks, oh gosh, it's going to be lit, please. Next. Then the offices and spaces. Next. The internal rooms. Next. The skin. This was amazing getting the rammers. These rammers are not with robots or anything. This is just hammers, bashing. So this is low skill craftsmen. But still you can make high architecture, I believe. Next.